So the first one, we know that the contribution margin, that's the revenues or the sales minus variable cost. So the revenues, that's the variable cost plus the contribution margin here. So it's 2,500. You stop me if you have any questions. In fact, since contribution margin is revenues minus variable cost, to get the revenues, I just add the contribution margin and the variable cost. Then the EBIT, that's the contribution margin minus fixed cost. So if the contribution margin is 2,000 and the EBIT 1,700, then it means the fixed cost are the contribution margin minus the EBIT. So it's 300 euros. Stop me if there is anything you find strange. And then the contribution margin ratio. The contribution margin ratio, you remember that the contribution margin ratio is total contribution margin over sales. So if I go here, I take the total contribution margin, I divide over revenues, and I get 80%. Then, second row, the contribution margin, that's the revenues minus the variable cost. So that's 500. If the fixed costs are 300, we get an EBIT of 200. The total cost, that's the variable cost plus the fixed cost. So the total cost, that's 1,500 plus 300, that's 1,800. The contribution margin ratio, that's still the contribution margin over the revenues, and here it's 25%. Then, third row, we have the revenues 1,000, we have the contribution margin 300. So if I subtract 1,000 minus 300, I get 700 euros of variable cost. We don't have the fixed cost, but we have the total cost. So the fixed cost, that's the total cost minus the variable ones. We have the total cost 1,000. We know that the variable costs are 700. So the fixed costs have to be 300. The EBIT, that's the contribution margin minus the fixed cost. That is 0. The contribution margin ratio, that's the contribution margin divided by revenues, and we get 30%. Then the last one, it's a little bit more tricky, but we have the contribution margin ratio and we have the revenues. So if I multiply the revenues with the contribution margin ratio, I get the corresponding contribution margin. I make 40% of contribution margin. So I apply 40% to my revenues and I get the contribution margin. That's 1,000 multiplied by 40. So the contribution margin was 600. That means the variable costs were 1,500 minus 600. So the variable costs were 900. The EBIT, that's 600, the contribution margin minus fixed cost.